It was a startling submission to the Senate Standing Committee, hearing evidence on Canada's new federal vaping regulations, Bill S5. The submission, delivered on the first day of testimony by the vanguard of the anti-tobacco movement, the Non-Smokers' Rights Association, set the tone for the entire 5 days of hearings. To the surprise of many, the NSRA provided a thorough endorsement of vaping as a tool for harm reduction and made several key recommendations to improve the legislation, recommendations which substantiate many of the concerns held by the vaping industry. For over 40 years, the Non-Smokers' Rights Association and its sister organization, the Smoking and Health Action Foundation, have been at the forefront of tobacco control efforts in Canada and around the world. The NSRA pioneered the forceful campaigning that led to the first public smoking bylaws in cities from St. John's to Calgary as early as 1977. It played a critical role in the passage of the Federal Tobacco Products Control Act in 1988, which included a ban on tobacco advertising. And the NSRA also led the precedent-setting effort to institute graphic health warnings on cigarette packages, which became the standard around the world. The Non-Smokers' Rights Association also leads the effort on tobacco taxation and the push for plain packaging. Quite simply, the NSRA is the mortal enemy of the tobacco industry and is responsible for big victories in the war to eradicate its deadly products. With such a track record, one might think that the Non-Smokers' Rights Association would also oppose vaping, as other non-profit health organizations in Canada do. The Canadian Lung Association, Canadian Cancer Society, and the Heart and Stroke Foundation have each discouraged vaping as a tool for harm reduction and frustrated industry efforts to communicate a positive message about vaping to the public. Over the past 6 months, representatives from these three organizations have turned down repeated requests by RegWatch to appear on this show. Joining us today for a deep dive into the regulatory issues around vaping in Canada is Pippa Beck, Senior Policy Analyst at the Non-Smokers' Rights Association. Ms. Beck and colleague Melody Tilson delivered the NSRA's submission to the Senate Standing Committee on Social Affairs, Science and Technology, the SOCI hearings, on April 5th of this year.
Health Canada has stated that vaping products are likely less harmful alternatives to tobacco use. And this is incorrect. Although the extent to which vaping is less harmful than smoking remains a topic of spirited debate amongst scientists, the evidence to date shows that e-cigarettes are less harmful than cigarettes. Research also indicates that beliefs that vaping is as risky as smoking may impede smokers from trying and regularly using e-cigarettes, choosing to continue smoking instead. While it is important for people to know that vaping products are not inherently safe to use, it is equally important for smokers to know that less harmful choices exist.
The evidence is quite clear that e-cigarettes are less harmful, but as Melody said, the spirited debate is around the degree of less harm. Is it really 95%, as we often hear? I think I was just at a meeting with Health Canada and international experts were agreeing it's probably, well, the consensus is more in the 60 to 80% realm, which gives us unparalleled opportunity to really make a difference in this epidemic that we're facing. Nicotine replacement therapy is effective in certain cases when it's used with counseling, etc. There are barriers, but you don't see groups forming organizations cheering around nicotine replacement therapy. This is a totally different ballgame, and I think you're right. We still don't know all of the details around what's in the vape, but I think we've got enough information that we need to move on this. Lives are at stake.
Pippa, thanks again for coming on the show. Please tell our viewers a little bit about the history behind the NSRA.
We started because secondhand smoke was in people's faces everywhere. People could smoke anywhere and everywhere. The smoking rate was high. It was up near the 50% level, at least for men. And people were sick of it. And so our organization started in 1974 to get secondhand smoke out of people's faces. And today, we've been really successful. There's hardly any secondhand smoke in indoor environments, and we even now have outdoor environments where secondhand smoke is not permitted. We've broadened our work. We very much focus on the source of the tobacco epidemic here in Canada, which is the tobacco industry. And so a lot of our work is focused on controlling the industry to control the epidemic.
Pippa, it sounds like the NSRA has expanded its scope from just non-smokers to also include smokers as well.
Exactly. And our name doesn't accurately reflect what we do today, and that is a project in progress.
So your organization is also concerned with helping smokers trying to quit?
Most smokers want to quit. They're desperate to quit. They've tried many, many times. And so a lot of the things that we do around graphic health warnings, taxation, smoke-free spaces, tobacco retail reform, there's all sorts of things that help smokers gain control over their addictions and can help them cut down or quit smoking.
And speaking of quitting, Pippa, let's turn now to vaping. Based on your testimony at the SOCI hearings, is it fair to say that the Non-Smokers' Rights Association supports vaping?
We absolutely support the legalization and the regulation of vaping products. So it's been a decade essentially since the products have been available in Canada, and Canadians deserve regulation for safety and for their health. So when you buy a product that claims it has 18 milligrams per milliliter of nicotine, we want to feel confident that that's what we're getting. When we buy a product, we want to be confident that it's in a child-proof container so that children won't be able to access it. We want to be sure that an e-cigarette battery isn't going to explode. And if it does explode, we want to be sure that there are measures in place for the government to be able to recall the product and to be able to take steps to make sure it doesn't happen again. And those are all things that are addressed in Bill S5. So we absolutely support the measures that are going to improve the health for Canadians through the safety and manufacturing standards of vaping products.
Pippa, I want to play now for our viewers a soundbite from your colleague Melody Tilson at the SOCI hearings, which I found quite revealing.
We believe that despite Health Canada's stated intention to balance risk with access, Bill S5 focuses disproportionately on the risks of vaping products without adequate consideration of the potential benefits, health benefits and economic benefits of shifting large numbers of Canadians away from smoking. Smokers desperately need and have a right to reliable information about vaping products on which to make informed decisions. As drafted, Bill S5 provides no assurance that regulations would require the provision of relative risk information, which clearly runs counter to the goal of the Tobacco and Vaping Products Act, and I quote, to protect the health of Canadians in light of conclusive evidence implicating tobacco use in the incidence of numerous debilitating and fatal diseases. To this end, we have proposed a number of amendments that would permit and indeed require both companies and the government to provide accurate relative risk information.
Pippa, it was this portion of the testimony that was the most astonishing, to hear such a strong criticism of Bill S5 coming from such a prominent advocacy group.
Yes. So we were dismayed to see that the bill does appear to focus disproportionately on the risks without adequately considering and appreciating the huge benefits that there are potentially for smokers in Canada. We still have 5 million smokers, many of whom want to quit and are looking for ways to do that. When one looks in the bill, there does seem to be a lot of focus on protection of youth. And when it comes to access for adult smokers, it's got to be more than just having access. There has to be access to information, and specifically relative risk information. And that was one of our main concerns around Bill S5, was the lack of ability of manufacturers and vape shops and so forth to be able to make relative risk comments for consumers.
Pippa, this prohibition on information regarding the relative risk of vaping versus smoking is one of the most concerning aspects of the bill. Now, the NSRA proposed amendments to Bill S5 that would allow for relative risk messaging, and those amendments passed committee. Is this a win?
Yeah, it's significant. It's a big win, and hopefully those amendments will stick, because Canadians deserve information to be able to make informed choices that affect their health. And as we've said to Health Canada, we shouldn't have to wait until the science is absolutely clear. That'll be decades from now, and that'll be too late. So we can move now with the information that we have and can make statements, and as more evidence emerges, we can fine-tune our messages. Canadians also shouldn't have to wait until e-cigarettes are proven to be an effective cessation device. This isn't about cessation. It's about choosing a less harmful alternative that many Canadians may decide they want to try and quit smoking with. But for now, it's good enough that it's less harmful, and Canadians should be able to know that through messaging from Health Canada and through limited statements that companies can make about their products.
Pippa, as you know, Health Canada is putting together an expert panel to periodically review the evidence on vaping. What kinds of relative risk statements do you think might get approved?
Statements that are objective, but also implicitly have a health aspect to them. We might see statements such as no secondhand smoke, no tar, no tobacco, no combustion. And those are helpful. They're not amazing, but they're a start. And then as Health Canada's expert panel gets underway and starts to consider more fulsome statements, maybe we'll start to see statements permitted that say things like vaping is not risk-free, but vaping is less harmful than smoking tobacco. That would be a really important, really helpful statement that could help people make choices that could potentially save their lives. I mean, tobacco is unparalleled in its danger for Canadians and for people around the world. And so these are life-saving statements.
Pippa, the Non-Smokers' Rights Association was the first health organization in Canada to put out a position statement on e-cigarettes. Now, that was back in 2013, and it was quite fair. In what way has your position evolved over the past 4 years?
We have adjusted our position slightly. So, for example, flavors would be one aspect. We initially called for a ban on flavors, given our experience with tobacco. But as the evidence came forth and we understood better the role of flavorings, particularly fruit and so forth, we have nuanced our position. And so we're not supportive of a full ban on flavors, but we do call for restrictions on flavorings that overtly target youth, such as candy and some of these other weird flavors that involve unicorns and things.
Pippa, you just said the NSRA does not support a full ban on flavors, but there's a lot of confusion on this issue. In an interview with RegWatch, Susie McDonald, Director General at Health Canada, said there is no flavor ban, only name and marketing restrictions for certain categories. Yet at the SOCI hearing, you made a contrary comment. Let's have a listen.
It's our understanding that it's not the names that would be changed, it's the inherent flavors. So we're not against flavorings for nicotine products. It's just ones that are overtly targeting children, such as candy and dessert, wouldn't be acceptable.
Okay, Pippa, you're on the RegWatch hot seat now. Could you clarify for our viewers, is there a ban on inherent flavors in Bill S5?
Yes, this was quite confusing, and it's taken us a little while to clarify, but we've come to understand that what we initially understood was incorrect. And so, yes, as you pointed out through Susie McDonald's input and Health Canada's clarification, is that the flavors are not being banned. It's the promotion of the flavors.
Pippa, there's thousands of vapors across Canada sitting on the edge of their seat right now. Could you please repeat that point?
As we understand it, as has been confirmed by Health Canada, flavors are not banned by Bill S5. Bill S5 puts restrictions on promotion and advertising of certain flavors. And there's a schedule at the back of the bill that covers those.
And Pippa, from your understanding, why are flavors important?
Well, as I've understood from reading the evidence, flavors really help cut the ties between tobacco smoking and vaping. And so I've understood, and in fact, the gentleman who testified on the same day that our organization did said that many vapors start off with tobacco flavors and then quickly, I guess, as their sense of smell and taste start to return, can't tolerate the flavor of tobacco and switch to fruit or other flavors. So we recognize that flavoring definitely has a role to play, and so it's good that they're not being banned by Health Canada.
Well, thanks, Pippa. Inquisition's over. For our final question, let's switch gears. I have to say that contrary to what we hear from most health groups, talking with you today, I get the sense that nicotine is not the enemy.
No, nicotine isn't the enemy. Combustion's the enemy. The industry that promotes cigarettes is the enemy. Not since the invention of the Bonsack cigarette making machine in 1880 has the tobacco industry been so upturned. E-cigarettes are a disruptive technology. So like the Bonsack cigarette making machine spelled the beginning of the end for the chewing tobacco industry, e-cigarettes, I believe, are the beginning of the end for the cigarette industry. It is a game changer.
Well, that's it for this edition of RegWatch. Before you head off, please like us on Facebook and don't forget to follow us on Twitter. For RegulatorWatch.com, I'm Brent Stafford.